All right, everybody, let's talk about testing in this foundation period, in particular, the 5-minute tests. I look at several different physiological anchors by which to judge your performance and to define you physiologically as an athlete. Are you a sprinter? Are you a steady state time trialist, right? Pursuiter? Like, what kind of physiology do you have? And so there's basically 5 anchors or 5 different tests that I look at. 5-minute tests, which we're going to discuss today, being one of them. Obviously, everybody knows about the FTP test, that 20-minute blowout, okay? Because of how I test and the software that I use to analyze that test, I do not require a 5-minute blowout before that 20-minute test. We will get that 5-minute data and understand your FTP by these other tests, by incorporating other data. So I only want the 20-minute test for the FTP test. So the FTP test is a big one. That establishes your house, if you will. Then we want your ceiling, the roof of that house, which is your VO2 max, your maximal oxygen uptake. That is the 5-minute test. Then we want a sprint test, right? So what is your sprint? What kind of muscles, what kind of fiber types do you have? And then we want to get your 1 minute, which is a great one. And then also your what's called a power maximum, if you will, P max, which is basically maybe a little more than 1 second. It's 1 full revolution of this leg, 1 full revolution of that leg. And all those tests, those 5 anchor points go a long way in defining not only your FTP, right? So your FTP, there you have, whenever you do an FTP test, you're getting aerobic contributions to that test and you're getting anaerobic contributions to that test. And so we want to know what your FTP test is and what your anaerobic contributions to that test are, what your aerobic contributions to that test is, and for all of your efforts that you're doing, okay? So the 5-minute test, this is a great time to be talking about this because we are at that foundation period during the summer and fall months. I don't necessarily, unless there's an event that requires a really dialed in understanding of VO2 and that athlete's VO2. Usually I don't have those unless you're, cyclocross, of course, is the thing where you would really need this. But for my athletes, it's all about the pacing. And for all these tests, the 1 minute, you just go out as hard as you can. Stand for 20 seconds, sit for 20 seconds, stand for those last 20 seconds. This is an all-out max effort. The 5-minute, there is some pacing. It's just not an all-out max effort as hard as you can go until your legs fall off. There is some pacing in the 5-minute effort. And I just had an athlete give me this morning his all-time best 5-minute. So I wanted to jump into his data really quick and talk about the 5-minute test, how you can get your best 5-minute test. All right, so key to all this is your lap screen. And here's my all-time lap screen. We have lap time, 3-second power, heart rate, cadence, lap power. This is what I like to see because for the 5-minute test, you are going to want to pace negative splits, meaning you're going to want to start your test out slower, easier, build strength, build momentum, and end all out harder, faster, right? And so that's going to be one of the best ways that we can get your best watts, to understand where your physiology is, to understand where your VO2 max season is. And this particular screen, this is a great screen. You have your lap time, like that's pretty self-explanatory. Your 3-second power, and this effort is a balance between your 3-second power and your lap power. Key to all of this is to know where to begin your test, to know where you want to start that interval at, right? So, a common number might be for a 5-minute test, a master's athlete, you might have like a 5 minute of 380 watts. Okay. So we will, we want to understand where to start that interval. And so we look at the data. We look at the last 90-day bests for your 5 minute. I look at the year. What are your yearly 365-day bests? Where are you in your training? What have you been doing the last 90 days? All that plays into a calculation of where to start your best 5 minutes. So you've not been doing 5 minutes. You've not been having racing events that demand 5 minutes or anything like that. Then I typically start lower. It's like, hey, start, if your best PR wherever for your 5 minute is 380 and you're in a great position right now, you're feeling good, life is good, there's no stress, let's start that effort at 375 and let's see if we can end that effort maybe at 390, something like that. All right, does that make sense? So we really want to pace those negative splits. We want to strategize on where to do this. Now, if you're doing a 5 minute test every month, you can really dial yourself in. I typically don't do 5 minute tests every month unless I have a very specific type of athlete with very specific type of events that depend on that 5 minute. But yeah, I think that so like every 3 months, I'll do a baseline testing of the 5 minute. Okay. All right, so how did this athlete do in this test? Right, well, he nailed it. This is his 5 minute effort. This is his power trend line. So the yellow is his power, and see, obviously he nails the effort. He starts it at a great wattage, and then he nails it, and then he has a lot to the finish. And notice he started this. This particular athlete needs some warm-up time, so you can see that he started the 5 minute test at minute 44. And this was actually, he's been with me for a couple years. This was his best all-time 5 minute. And what's fascinating is that it's the beginning of his base period. He is well rested. And so now this is a very important point. Sometimes your best numbers come, guess what? When you're rested, right? Maybe not necessarily when you're in the heat of battle, but fatigue is often the enemy of performance. And I see this all the time in the data where I'll have an athlete like, I don't know, I haven't done a 5 minute test in a long time, that, but they just have a great aerobic foundation and they're rested, and boom, they nailed it. He nailed it. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into that 5 minute, and that it is something that you do want to pace. Pacing is key. It's one of my most common subjects that I discuss in any video. Pacing. Pacing is managing your energy distribution. I have a lot of videos on pacing, and I will put in the show notes two videos on negative splits, because that is what this particular athlete did in this case, and he nailed his all-time best 5 minute PR. Thanks, everybody.